Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Instant Deck Tech. So, as you probably know by now, Monday means it's Modern Monday, and we have a really sweet Modern list to look at today. This is 4-color Gifts Rites, and it recently took Alan Cox to a top 8 finish at a TCG States event, so congrats to Alan on their finish with the deck. A quick reminder before we break down the deck: if you enjoy this deck and you want to see it made into videos, take a minute, click the like button, the subscribe button, leave a comment, anything you can do to support your deck, because whichever deck is most popular gets a shot at being made into videos next week. So, 4-color Gifts Rites is built around the combo of Gifts Ungiven and Unburial Rites, and this is a really powerful but not very intuitive combo. So, Gifts Ungiven, its intention is to let someone search their library for 4 cards with different names, and then your opponent gives you 2 of them, the other 2 to go to your graveyard. However, there is a trick to this where you can fail to find on some number of cards. So if you only search for 2 cards with Gifts Ungiven, those cards will 100% of the time, no matter what your opponent does, go to the graveyard. So the idea is we cast our Gifts Ungiven, we tutor up an Unburial Rites, which is a reanimation spell that we can cast from our graveyard with flashback for 3 and a white, and then as our second choice, we get something like Elesh Norn Ceonbite or Iona of Emeria. So these cards are super powerful, and with this deck, if we can get a little bit of ramp with like a Noble Hierarch, we can Gifts Ungiven on turn 3, on turn 4, reanimate one of our big finishers. If we're up against an aggro deck with a lot of creatures, we probably go with Elesh Norn. If we're up against a more spell-based combo deck, we likely go with Iona, naming whatever our opponent's combo happens to be, or if our opponent's like 1-color, mono red or something, then Iona just locks someone out of the game. So this is kind of the idea of the deck, is to be able to Gifts Ungiven for the Unburial Rites and get back a really huge creature really early in the game. The rest of the deck is pretty interesting. So Grimflayer and Liliana the Veil give us some more ways to stock our graveyard. While Gifts for Unburial Rites is how we finish the game in our primary plan, the rest of the deck is kind of like a value deck with just a lot of good stuff going on, a lot of weird numbers. You'll see a lot of 3-ofs, 2-ofs, 1-ofs, and that's because we can always use Gifts Ungiven to not combo off and to get a bunch of different cards, get a couple in our hand. So Grimflayer, powerful threat in the early game, also just mills some cards into our graveyard, which helps us naturally stock our graveyard for Unburial Rites if we don't have Gifts. We have some other graveyard synergies too. Liliana the Veil does it all, attacks our opponent's hand, lets us discard our fatty if it gets stuck in our hand, our Iona or Elesh Norn, and the ultimate's fairly game winning. We also have a couple of cards that work well with the graveyard. Snapcaster Mage in specific lets us get back our spells. It's also a key piece to some Gifts piles. We have Inquisition and Thoughtseize, which we'll talk about in a minute. If we get Inquisition and Thoughtseize and Snapcaster, we're pretty much guaranteed to have a Thoughtseize effect, because even if our opponent mills both the discard spells, we can always flash it back with Snapcaster. And Lingering Souls is just a great graveyard card. It clogs up the ground, buys us some time while we're kind of dealing with our 4-color clunky mana base, and it can just win the game by beating down with a bunch of spirits. Noble Hierarch is just an accelerant. It lets us get to our gifts on turn 3. We have a lot of weird expensive stuff in the deck, like the rest of our creatures, for example. So these are all 1-ofs, but they're all part of Gifts packages. We can, in a pinch, Gifts Rites for one of these. If we need to gain some life, we can get a Siege Rhino or a Thragtusk. If we just need a huge, almost impossible to deal with flyer, Sigarda could be the choice. So these are just one-ofs that we can Gifts up when we need them. Helps us stabilize in the mid-game, and gives us something that we can cast that impacts the board that isn't 7 or 9 mana like our other big finishers. Spell-wise, we have a lot of removal, but as you can see, things are broken down into the Gifts piles. So having 4 Fatal Pushes is fine, or 4 Path to Exiles is fine, but if you're playing Gifts Ungiven, you want to be able to create piles to get what you need. So if we need to kill a creature, we can create a Gifts pile that's something like Fatal Push, Path to Exile, Abrupt Decay, and maybe a Snapcaster or something, and we're guaranteed to get 2 removal spells out of that pile no matter what our opponent does. So that's why it's better than playing just 4 Path to Exile in this specific deck. Same thing with the discard, as I mentioned before. Instead of playing 4 Thoughtseize or 4 Inquisition, if we split split them up, throw Snapcaster into the mix, we're guaranteed to be able to tutor up a Thoughtseize with our Gifts Ungiven if we're up against a Storm deck or a combo deck and we really need this effect to disrupt our opponent's plans. The mana base is absurd. There are 24 lands in the deck, and there are 19 unique lands, so we're not going to go over all of them. The lands on this slide are kind of the unique lands that do something different. Stirring Wildwood gives us a creature land. Gavany Township allows us to pump up all of our random things. Ghost Quarter lets us disrupt our opponent if they're playing Tron or creature lands. And Urborg's just like a massive mana fixer for black. Remember, you can gift for lands as well, and that's why the mana base is so scattered. We're playing just a ton of different fetches, a ton of different shock lands, a ton of different basic lands, and that's why we have so many different lands, because Gifts does search for cards of different names, so if we need a shock land, we can search up 4 different shock lands and hopefully get the color we need. Same with fetch lands, basic lands, so it benefits us to play these weird scattered numbers with this deck because of Gifts Ungiven. In the sideboard, we have Raven's Crime and Life from Loam, which gives us some more graveyard action. We can mill these cards with our Gifts Ungiven or with our Grimflayer or discard them with Iona. Basically, if we tutor these up with gifts, we don't care if it goes in our hand or our graveyard, because if it goes in our graveyard, we can always get them back. Life from the Loam gets back our lands, allows us to kind of Ghost Quarter lock our opponent, get back our creature lands, our Gavany Township. Raven's Crime just combos with Life from the Loam because we can keep getting back those lands and then using those lands to retaste Raven's Crime to get our opponent empty-handed. Collective Brutality, Path to Exile, Abrupt Decay, more removal. Collective Brutality kind of does it all, gives us a duress effect as well. Negate for combo decks and control decks, Stony Silence for affinity, Bojuka Bog to deal with dredge and other graveyard decks, and that is 4-color Gift Rites for Modern, and that's our instant deck for today. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.